Hello, everybody. In our parsha of Devarim, we read that Moshe Rabbeinu, so to speak, complains of the difficulty of his position. Eicha esa levadi tarchachem umasa'achem v'rivchem. How can I alone bear the responsibility of all the disagreements, etc.? And so Moshe suggests that the people do something about it. Havu lachem anashim chachamim unevonim v'yiduim. You should select people who are wise, who are intuitive, nevonim, and are well known to you for their qualities in your shvatim, l'shiftechem, v'asimeim b'rashechem, and I shall assign them to be at the head, at the leadership positions of all of you. And then we read, Va'ekach et Rashi Shiftechem, Anashim Chachamim V'yiduim V'etein Otam Rashim Aleichem. Moshe then selected people who were leaders of their tribes, who were wise and well known for their qualities, and he placed them in positions of authority and leadership over the masses. And there are a number of questions, one of which is raised in the Gemara in Masechet Nedarim. Originally, Moshe suggests to find people who are Chachamim and Nivonim and Yeduim. And then when Moshe goes and selects people, we read only of people who were Chachamim and Yeduim, and Nivonim seems to have been dropped. Secondly, Moshe originally suggested, Havu lachem, you the people, go pick for yourselves. And then at the end of the day, we read that Moshe simply selected, Va'ekach et Rashi Shiftechem. So perhaps one answer is offered by the Medrash that Moshe sought, or the people sought, Nivonim, but there were none to be found. Really? In all of the people, there were no Nivonim whatsoever? So there are those who say yes, that's exactly it. There were no people who had the quality of Nivonim. What is the concept of Nivonim? People who are mevin davar mitoch davar, that can infer one thing from the other, who could go beyond what they are spoon-fed and rationalize and reason on their own. Now, the Vilna Gaon suggests that perhaps Nivonim are included in the concept of Chachamim. However, if that were the case, then why does Moshe initially list Nivonim as separate from the Chachamim? Again, what did Moshe say? Havu lachem anashim chachamim unevonim v'yiduim. If chachamim include nivonim, then just say chachamim v'yiduim, as in fact he did. So the Netziv of Volozhin suggests the following. Since Moshe wound up on his own picking the people, he could not know who were the Nivonim, for a very simple reason. When a person stood in front of Moshe, being considered for a leadership position, this was an awesome experience, where a person would literally shake and tremble. Who would have the audacity to be mechadesh davar, lahavin davar mitoch davar, in the face of Moshe Rabbeinu? And thus, when he interviewed people or sat with them, none of them wanted to show off such skills. Rav Yaakov of Lisa, in his Sefer Chavat Da'at, he understands the following. He says, people looked at Moshe Rabbeinu and they could understand what it takes to be a leader of Klal Yisrael. And when they saw how people related to Moshe during 4 decades of his leadership, they demurred. They said, we don't need it. I'm not interested in the COVID and all the headaches and the sorrow and the complaining and the backstabbing and the accusations. And therefore, when the people went to fulfill Moshe's design that they select Chachamim, Nevonim, V'Yiduim, they were unable to find anyone willing to fulfill the position. So therefore, Moshe had to do it himself. And that's why it says, Va'ekach. He simply took, he appointed, he assigned on his own, because no one wanted to step forward, knowing the agmat nefesh, the frustration and aggravation that Moshe, as the leader of Am Yisrael, had to endure for all of these years. The Chassam Sofer actually takes a different point of view. And he says, this is actually Lishvach Yisrael. It is praiseworthy of Am Yisrael. To be a Navon means lahavin davar mitoch davar, to be creative. And the people who might have been such were tznuim. They were modest. They wanted that it be sufficient, that they be the trustworthy and loyal carriers of all the teachings of those who had taught them. And so therefore, they didn't want to look at themselves as people worthy of being nivonim on such a high and lofty level. And this comports with what we read in Pirkei Avot based on a pasuk in Mishlei, where Rav Nahorai says, have a gola l'mekom Torah. A person should see to it that he always finds himself in a place where there is Torah scholarship, v'el binatcha, and as to having to rely on your own intuition, instead of having greater Torah scholars to lead you, al tisha'ein. Don't rely on that. That last clause is a pasuk from Mishlei. V'al binatcha al tisha'ein. But actually, why is that the case? So, of course, some suggest when you rely on your own intuition and your own ability to infer A from B, etc., it speaks a little bit of a grandiose self-assessment, of yehirut, of gaiva, of an absolute lack of humility. Maybe even we could call it arrogance. And as the Radak puts it in Mishlei, this leads a person to assume that whatever he accomplishes is of his own doing. Kolchi va'otzem yadi asali etachaya lazeh. Not only in the material sense, but in the intellectual and in the spiritual sense as well. And therefore, the entire pasuk, half of which was quoted in Pirkei Avot, reads, Betachel Hashem b'chol libecha. Put your entire trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'el binatcha al tisha'ein. Try to understand what you were taught by your teachers who were imbued with Yiras Shamayim. And don't try to create things on your own. But this begs the question. When it came to the building of the Mishkan, we are told regarding Bitzalel, Va'amale oto ruach Elokim b'chochma, b'tvuna, uvedat. Bitzalel is praised precisely for having this tchuna, this characteristic of bina, of tevuna. So why are we saying Ve'el binatcha al tisha'ein? And the Malbim puts it so beautifully in Mishlei. El binatcha tisha'en, you know why? Ki ha'chochma lo tusag el ha'adam al yedei binato, ela hi netuna me'elokim. If a person is driven to be original just for the sake of being original, of conjuring up things on his own, as opposed to realizing that his intellectual prowess and capability is in itself a gift of God and has to be taken in that prism, in that understanding, it's netuname elokim, then Bina is laudatory. It is the person who tries to come up with things independent of this recognition of the divine gift that gets into trouble. And that's why by Betzalel, it says it so very clearly. Va'amaleo to ruach elokim. Betzalel's self-awareness that he was a chacham and he was a maven, he had tvuna, and he had dat. He understood that this was due to Ruach Elokim, and he utilized these intellectual tools appropriate. And so that's what Moshe was looking for. But the people didn't understand that. And so those who maybe had that capacity felt that in the spirit of Anivut, they weren't going to put themselves forward. And thus Moshe had to select the people, even if none could proclaim that they were Nivonim. And so he picked wise people. And we too have to realize that all of our abilities, not only in the material realm, but also in the intellectual realm, are gifts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shabbat Shalom.